As English learners, we have all different ways of learning a word. Some prefer to read books, while some others pick up words from movies. For a long time, we used to make distinction between incidental learning and intentional learning. Incidental learning means vocabulary are best learned incidentally as a byproduct of the learner being engaged in listening, reading, speaking, or writing activity. The more you're exposed to the vocabulary within the context, the more likely it is for you to pick up the new word. In contrast, intentional learning means that you learn new vocabulary intensively. Some examples of this learning method are memory cards, recite the new words before dictation, circling new words from the text, and remember them out of the context. There were a lot of scholars favoring incidental learning, arguing that most of our vocabulary are learned incidentally through reading. But later research revealed that it is the quality and frequency of the information processing that matters. Most of us are already familiar with the idea that elaboration on aspects of words' form and meaning, plus rehearsal, determines the retention of the new information. As for pedagogical benefits from the research, it was discovered that the successful learning of vocabulary actually requires 3 stages, namely elaboration, rehearsal, and automatization. Elaboration can be activities like creating a personal database of new vocabulary, categorizing newly learned vocabulary. However, there are non-core vocabularies that will not frequently appear in the reading, needs further attention. For those non-core vocabularies, we need to elaborate them through morphology, pronunciation, porosity, meanings, translations, typical examples of usage, or other personal associations with the new vocabulary. With the development of technology, computer and cell phones also play a role in elaborating vocabularies for you. Programs such as Master Words or Happy Words organize your personal learning profiles. Words can also be learned in different games too. After elaboration comes the rehearsal, which means repetition of new information or repeated exposure to the targeted information. Testing and recalling of new vocabulary are also ways of rehearsal. Empirical research has revealed that regular but spaced exposure is much more beneficial comparing to intensive repetition in a short period of time. So, it is significant to carefully plan your repetition in longer periods. Rote learning means repeated learning of a list of vocabulary isolated from the context. The bias that if you want to forget something, put them in a list is actually unwarranted. If you would like to do rote learning, make sure you understand the meaning of each item. Speaking and listening requires the ability to process 2 to 3 words per second, and reading requires 6. Which means knowing a word is not enough. To be able to use a word, one needs to be able to come up with the word automatically. It was assumed that when you know the meaning of a word, you can easily recognize them in the reading or listening activities, so that the practice and training on automatization is usually neglected. This is especially true in second language acquisition. In order to reach automatization, it requires to continue the repeated exposure of old vocabulary items, and this could lead to a problem because the learners are usually more curious about new things, so they can get demotivated. To counteract the tediousness of learning old things constantly, it is beneficial to organize old vocabulary items in new context. For example, a news story or lecture that contains recently learned vocabularies. A useful way to train automatization is to speed up, both in reading and listening, until you can decipher the new vocabulary almost effortlessly. For teachers to design some activities that accelerate speed in reading and listening is significant. One of those activities is to rewrite an old sentence or paragraph grammatically by changing a few words in them, and then give both text. Ask students to quickly locate the difference. In this way, they are forced to speed up the reading. Another activity could be asking students to watch TV shows or presentations in the second language while keeping attention on the subtitles. To be effective, the program or lecture needs to be watched multiple times. In this case, speeding up is also forced. To sum up to now we believe vocabulary learning can be effective with a combination of in-depth primary elaborations, deliberate rehearsal activities, and personalized trainings on teaching of automatization.